was kind of hoping no one would show up, but people did, so unfortunately I'll have to talk for a while. So what my presentation is really about is achieving broadcast scale with cloud-native technologies. And I think a lot of people have expectations on what that may be, but what my focus here right now will be around how we've built the organization, how we've built our technology stack, leveraging commoditized infrastructure, leveraging AWS, leveraging scalable technologies, really to build out for global expansion, very large customers, large live global events, sporting, things like that on the OTT side. So that's what I'm going to cover. I'm not really going to talk about multi-CDN or scale at the edge or things like that, but really how we've built our solution, our organization, and the technologies within there to drive the scale that we have. So what we do, we are Vimond Systems. My role is on the strategy side and the partnership side. We are a OTT provider, a technology provider, and we do everything from the content ingestion to pushing out to the CDN, but a very big focus on the assets themselves, the management of content, the organization of it, the curation of it, and really how OTT services, SVOD or AVOD or whatever it may be, can be created. We have some other things there too, not that interesting. But as a company, Vimond comes out of Norway, and so we've been doing streaming technologies first as TV2 in Norway since the late 90s. So as early, as streaming was getting into the market, we were out there creating services. So in 1997, we had our first streaming service out there. You can find it on the Wayback Machine. You can see what codec it was. It was, I think, one of the precursors to Macromedia and things like that. So we've been doing this a very long time. In 2002, we started a subscription service, which is still running. And at various points, we've had over about a quarter of Norway's users on there with various live events. So TV2 in Norway has VOD assets, there are 12 linear channels, and does a lot around live events, sports, things like that. So from the very beginning, we were addressing questions of scale very early on. We cobbled together CDNs in Norway before Akamai moved in and gave that kind of scale just to achieve it. At points, we were shutting down the internet because of the volume of the scale, right? So we experienced very early on the challenges with delivering very large scale experiences in these services. We've expanded as a company. In about 2011, we spun off as our own company with about 9 founders. And have grown ever since. We added customers like Comcast, Reuters here in the US. We've had very large growth with iFlix, who we've been with since day one, who's a very large SVOD service in Southeast Asia, who's moved now into linear OTT services as well and does a lot in sporting events. So with customers like this, both Comcast, iFlix, you have very large scale, right? These are very large customers in many countries. And they present a lot of challenges that we needed to address. They have very complex needs, complex environments, complex business services, and we as an organization needed to address those very efficiently, very rapidly. We've signed some other customers like Optus. We do a lot around sporting, and I'll show you a list here. These are some of our customers: TV2 in Norway, iFlix, PLTD, the Olympic Channel, the Bonnier Group, Flow Sports, KO in Australia, which just launched, which has about 50 different sports, 50,000 hours of content this year, continuous live linear events in there. And so if you take a look at our global sports profile, which is very live driven, very large scale, these are big brands, big sporting events, real time viewing of live events and that sort of thing. So the idea of showing this slide is really to get you an understanding of our mindset as a company. We have very large tier 1 customers, very premier brands, very high expectations from the end user around the viewing, the ability to get, whether it's an English Premier League soccer game, whether it's a cricket match or something like that. These are very large events, very peak concurrent, high driven type of events. I was just trying to figure out what I put in the last slide. But so what we're trying to do now is we've taken a look at our technology stack, which we've built since the late 90s and had multiple iterations of, and really modernizing it to the type of scale that we want to build. For a while, people in the OTT space, you were worried about 300,000 or 500,000 subscribers, right? But now you're looking at 1 million concurrent, 5 million concurrent, and beyond in the next couple of years. As the consumers continue to grow, you're going to have volumes in the tens and 20s a million viewers on a single event. You look at, I think it's this Sunday, Game of Thrones, which is airing on HBO. It's airing, on their streaming services through HBO Now and various services. There's an expectation that there will be globally a billion viewers around the globe, right? So you're looking at very large scale. You have things that we deal with like the Olympics, which is very large peak concurrence and very large scale. So we've architected a system that allows us to cost effectively manage it. We use, instead of developing everything in-house, we've leveraged AWS technologies, and I'll go through some of those and show how we're using these both to separate out the various data paths, create very clean workflows, create scalable components, and do this without scaling the organization, right? So as we grow, we want to increase the margins on the accounts, we want to drive costs down for the operators so they can drive better scale themselves and have better kind of financial plans and don't pass all the costs back into the end consumer. So some of the technologies, and this is really what we've gone ahead and done. We'd built various search pieces ourselves, and we've always used, where we can, open technologies. We use things like Solar in the past for search, but we built some of the video pipeline itself. But at this point, we can leverage both the transcoding capabilities we have and use Amazon's Elastic transcoder to get scale, right? So we can spin up transcoders for live events, or we can spin them up for very large content libraries. We've moved into a containerized environment where we use Kubernetes and Docker to really do rapid deployments and have the builds go out very quickly without a lot of, using different type of technologies. A build or something like that may take a week, but now you can do real-time deployments, real-time updates, roll out new containers and update the software and the code at the same time. We're using technologies like Kinesis and things like that to do real-time event-driven functionality. We're using Elastic Cache. We're leveraging AWS Lambda for very discrete, scalable processes across our technology stack, so we can spin them up very quickly. We can scale horizontally with the volume. We're taking advantage of things like DynamoDB, which is NoSQL databases that are very cost effective. It allows us to segment out the various data partitions and have very clean access at various components without some massive Oracle database or some more traditional centrally managed database. We use things like S3 like everyone else does for data store, but using all these technologies, using these commodity pieces from Amazon below our technology stack, we're able to focus on the workflow, the user experience. We have a technology stack through their technologies that can scale very efficiently. It can scale in real time. We don't have to over-provision in the old type of telco model. We can scale on the events. We can scale on user volume. We can do that in real time. We can scale kind of as the various, whether they're a VOD asset where everyone's coming in or a live event, like there's the Champions League today, right? So you're going to have a very high view of concurrence, but that viewership is going to drop off after the events, right? So you can scale specifically up to the event. I don't think anyone can see this, and I have some deeper, meatier technical slides as well that go to a great detail, and you guys are welcome to come over to our booth to get a deeper dive and understand some of these components. But this is just a highlight of our workflow. We manage and have services that have live events, live workflow, VOD workflow. And in there you can see the orange pieces in our solution, which are our key product modules. And then you can also see in the green where we use, maybe tie out to, if it's an AVOD service, to an ad server, or tie out to someone doing server-side ad insertion, or tie out to someone doing machine learning components that tie into our system through our APIs. One of the key components, as we've updated our technology stack, that also requires, a smarter logical architecture. Which components speak to each other, how they speak to each other. So we've broken down our various pieces and broken away from a more monolithic stack to more discrete pieces and functions that communicate very specifically to the various other areas. And so you can see there's a couple pieces here, but I'll get a little closer. So at the core piece, the orchestrator is the key component that takes content in, manages it, does the transcoding, pushes it out to the CDN, archives it where it's relevant, creates the HLS streams, creates the MPEG dash streams, right? So it's the workflow of taking content in, live or VOD, and pushing it out. You know, the next component in here is our central piece. It's really the workflow. Like, how does the content move through the life cycle? What are the aspects of the processing that get in there? What is the metadata handling? What is the user experience that the publisher using our technology has in moving assets around, curating them around? We have various other components in here. We have live channel planners and things like that that allows you to actually plan and schedule live events, output EPGs, and actually set, you know, live events for there. But as you see, they're very discrete in who talks to who and which components go through there. You know, we have a monetization module which we've separated, you know, out away from the back end. You know, we've made that discrete away. You know, we have identity management modules that doesn't touch the back end, but actually is in the workflow of the entitlement of the end user. You know, and then we have the content delivery piece, which is the actual play out of things as well. So this was my denser slide, and you know, this goes in a bit of depth, but for those of you who are technical, some of these technologies should be fairly clear to you. But what we're using, you know, in the solution, as I showed on the other slide, you know, we're using, you know, AWS S3, we're using Kinesis, we're using Lambda for these processes, for these scalable serverless transactions through here. We're using DynamoDB for our data store. So if you take a look at how our data stores are broken down, there's not a single database of content, but they are discretely separated for the part of the workflow that they're managing in there. You know, we're using caching at various points. You know, we've separated out, you know, the play event, getting user history. We're funding devices, right? So these are all separated out as various transactions in a very kind of discrete workflow. So you can see, here's our play service, right? And so it's accessing the database in that manner. So we've separated out quite a bit there. So this is very deep. You know, we're happy to have you guys over our booth and kind of go through it. But as we go through it, you know, we've separated out the end user experience, you know, how we actually authenticate users and manage the entitlements. We've separated that out from the content delivery flow and the play flow and everything like that. You know, we've separated out the workflow and everything like that. So within our system, everything that we have is exposed through our APIs, can be called in separate components through there. Similarly, we've separated out our billing and end user identity. So we have a monetization module in there where we can create product groupings and things like that. But we've also, you know, through our APIs and through this architecture, it allows us to tie into other things like Zoar or PayWizard, or you know, Evergent, depending on kind of the needs of the customer or what the technology requires for the specific implementation. Here's a little bit more on that. So that was my presentation. I went through it fairly quickly. A lot of this is very dense, but if there's any questions now, feel free to ask them. If not, you guys can come by our booth. We're right over there, not too far over. So feel free to come by or ask me questions now or grab me after this.